Our topic is entrepreneurship, starting and managing your own business. This is what we will cover, why people become entrepreneurs and what are the different types of entrepreneurs, the characteristics of successful entrepreneurs, how small businesses influence the US economy, first steps if you're going to start a business, what are the challenges involved with managing a small business? And there are many, I can tell you. What are the pros and cons of being a small business owner? Role of the Small Business Administration in helping small businesses, and trends related to entrepreneurship and small business. So we'll start off here with a couple statistics. There are about 6 million businesses in the United States, and 89% of them have fewer than 20 employees. Most of the businesses that we think about, that we see as these national chains, Kohl's, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson,
Root beer.
A&W Root Beer, these are all large companies with hundreds of employees. Right.
Small businesses like DK Oldies.
Well, there are a lot of small businesses, a lot of them we don't really even know about. There are, let's see,
Control at the Northbridge Mall.
probably over 5 million small businesses in the United States that you may be aware of some of them, as Eric pointed out, but then there are many we never hear about, right? Because they're small, right? They might have not only fewer than 20 employees, some don't have any employees.
And Round One's expanding.
Okay, what do?
It's a bowling and amusement store.
Okay, all right. So what's happening, from my experience, it's getting harder and harder for small businesses as regulation gets tighter, as costs go up, wages go up. Consumers have more choices. They can buy a lot of things online instead of buying from a local business. It's just getting harder and harder for businesses today. So we see a small number of very large companies in the United States. In fact, there are only 19,000 businesses in the US that have more than 500 employees. 19,000 out of 6 million, right? We have lots and lots of small businesses with a small number of employees and a few very large businesses with a large number of employees. The companies with less than 500 employees pay more than 41% of America's payroll. Those 19,000 businesses out of 6 million pay about 41% of the payroll. That means there are a lot of people out there working for these large businesses instead of working for small businesses. So let's say you decide to become an entrepreneur. Here's a checklist of things to think about. We're not going to go through all of them, but there are two I want to focus on. How many people would really use your product or service? Maybe you've come up with this great idea. Maybe you come up with a device that not only washes dishes like a dishwasher, but actually puts them away. That would be nice, right? Maybe it even loads the dishwasher. You just give it a whole bunch of dishes, it loads them, cleans them, puts them away. You would think everybody would want that, but you never know. Maybe it's too expensive. Maybe it's, I don't know, not safe, or maybe people don't believe it'll work. For whatever reason, you might think it's the best idea in the world, but if you can't convince people to buy it, then it's not going to work. The business will not be successful, right? So what often happens is people have a business idea because it's something they're passionate about. But that doesn't mean everybody else is passionate about it too. So what you might do, if you think back to our marketing chapter, you might use a market research firm to help you figure out, do people really want this product? And if so, what's the right price? And how should I promote it, right? That's all going to be critical. I'll tell you one example of this. I don't know if I've shared this story with you before, so let me know if I have, but one of my brothers-in-law has started multiple businesses, and finally, his most recent one is successful, but he probably had at least 8 that he started that didn't make any money. In fact, in some cases, he lost some money. And one of those that was not successful was called the gas handler, where, you know, when you're pumping gas on the handle, there's a little lock that holds the handle in place, right? So you don't have to stand there the whole time. Well, there was a time when that did not exist, when you had to stand there the whole time to pump the gas. So he developed this just little piece of metal. It was a very simple design that you would just clip on there, and that would allow you to let go, and it would just pump the gas by itself. He had them produced. I don't know how many, but he had a whole bunch of them that he ordered. Started trying to sell them. But around that time is when the gas station started to put those little locks on there so that you didn't have to hold the handle. His timing was off, right? If he had come out with that product a few years earlier, he probably would have sold them all, but he ended up with a garage full of these, you know, products that he couldn't sell, or at least couldn't sell very many of them. So doing your market research to make sure people really want what it is you're trying to buy or trying to sell is critical. But then here's the other side of it. Let's say it's such a good idea, everybody wants it. Your product is flying off the shelves, people are on a waiting list to buy your product because it's so popular. What do you think your competitors are going to do? They're going to copy it, right? They're going to find some way to make a similar product because they want to sell it too. How do you stop them from copying your product?
Copyrights.
Yeah, so a patent would protect the product. A copyright would protect, well, if it were an artistic product or a written text, you would copyright it. But if it's a physical product, you would patent it.
And you can register the name with your brand, because both they
You
get like
can
a
trademark
similar.
it as well. That's right. So that they can't copy the name or the logo. But even if you do that, and it's not that easy to patent something, you have to make sure nobody has a similar patent. You have to register with the US Patent and Trade Office, and probably pay a lawyer to help you do it. I guess you could do it on your own, but it would be better to work with a lawyer. But even after you do that, once somebody starts infringing on your patent or copying your design, you need to first of all detect that they're copying your product. And then you need to take legal action against them, which again requires a lawyer. And then if they keep doing it and you take them to court, you got more legal expenses now. It could take years. It's tying up your time in court. And then you win, and then you have to try to collect the money from the other company. Maybe they've already gone bankrupt at that point, and there's no money to collect.
If there was no money to collect, you would sue the state.
No, that wouldn't work. Yeah, because the state didn't do anything wrong. So it's just one of the risks of being an entrepreneur. Sometimes there are crooks out there that'll take your idea, and unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do. There are things you can do, but there's no guarantee that you can stop them. So that's something to think about. How do you protect your great idea? One way is if you can, when you start to sell your product, get the name out there so quickly that everybody associates your company with that product, and that any other companies that come afterwards are seen as an imitator, right? If you can pull that off, that might be one way. And that's why sometimes you'll see on some products, you know, we're the original whatever, right? Because they're trying to say, hey, this was our idea. Everybody else is a faker. So those are some things to think about. Do people really want your product, and how do you protected. Questions or comments?
I think I've read it to become even harder to protect like your ideas because I don't know if you've seen like TikTok Shop is like pure knockoff or imitation.
Oh, really? Okay,
It's kind of like to move.
yeah.
TikTok Shop.
Yeah, China has different intellectual property laws.
They do. So their products being sold here are subject to our laws, but what they sell in China, like, they can sell copies of even iPhones and things like that, and nobody can really stop them. Yeah, that's true. All right. In fact, let me tell you another story. My son's been selling some products on Amazon that he ordered from China. And, some people do this as a way to make money. It's drop shipping, yeah. So he orders the products, they get delivered from China to Amazon. He just markets them on Amazon and makes money when they get sold, but he never has to even see the product. It's all handled by Amazon. Well, there are two products that he researched pretty thoroughly.
Which Amazon warehouse would he ship it to?
I don't remember. Yeah, they're different ones.
Maybe the one in Hollister.
And you pay for like the bigger.
Yeah. But he did a lot of research to figure out what products would have the biggest profit margins and would sell the best. And he did a great job researching that. He picked two products. One of them was a yoga wheel that you can use if you want to like stretch your back, if you do yoga. And he checked to make sure, to the best of his ability, that it wasn't patented, that this product that had been designed in China could be sold legally here without any problem. However, once he ordered it and started selling it, some company here in the US said, nope, that's our design, you're infringing on our patent. So even though he had tried to make sure there was no patent violation, according to this other company, there was. Now he could challenge that. I don't know if he would win, but he decided it's just not worth the effort. So he had to tell Amazon, go ahead and just scrap all those yoga wheels I purchased, which cost him, I don't know exactly, but thousands of dollars.
Ooh, man.
And, yeah, painful, painful lesson about business. Another thing I'd warned him about was, what if somebody using this yoga wheel to stretch their back injures himself? They could sue you. You need to have insurance. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise that he had to have those yoga wheels scrapped. His other product, hopefully he'll sell enough to break even, because at this point, he's operating at a loss. So anyways, a couple things to think about if you're going to start your own business. Okay, types of entrepreneurs. Well, actually, let's start here. What differentiates an entrepreneur from a small business owner? Are they the same? And if not, what is the difference? If, let's say, your family started a business, and then your parents decided to retire and they're going to pass the business on to you. Now you own and manage the small business. You're a small business owner, small business manager, but you're not an entrepreneur. Because an entrepreneur takes a risk. They do something new. They invest their time and their money to create something, hoping it will work. Whereas a small business owner is just somebody who owns a small business. Okay. So let's look at some types of entrepreneurs. What I just described is the classic entrepreneur. Somebody with an idea, they invest their time and money and energy to try to make a business. If somebody does that multiple times, like my brother-in-law I mentioned, or like my son, he's on his 5th business right now. So far, none of them have really made any money, but he's learning, right? And he looks at it that way. He says the money I'm losing from some of these failed business attempts is kind of like I'm paying for an MBA, a Master of Business Administration. Not really, but that's the way he's looking at it. So a serial entrepreneur is somebody who starts multiple businesses. Some of them can be very successful. People like Sir Richard Branson, hate to say it, Elon Musk. These are some people who've had a number of businesses, and not all of their businesses were successful either. But because they started multiple, that makes them a serial entrepreneur, like a whole series of businesses. And then we have this funny word, intrapreneur. Anybody know what an intrapreneur is?
Inside, so like,
Yeah,
you have a company and someone's like bringing up the idea.
exactly. It's somebody that works inside an existing company. So they are an employee of a company, but they're starting a business on behalf of the company. Which is kind of cool because if you're in that position, you're getting a paycheck and you get to use the company's resources to try to start a new company. Google famously used to allow their employees to spend 20% of their time doing whatever they wanted to do. So you would do your normal job, basically 4 days a week, and then 1 day a week, you just work on whatever you want to work on. So if you had some idea to create some new Google product, you could do that on company time while you're getting paid. And then if it's a good idea and the company launches it, you probably get some big bonus and get to run that program, I would imagine. From what I understand, Google doesn't exactly do that anymore, but that would be an example of intrapreneurship, right? Where an employee gets to be an entrepreneur. Comments or questions? Let's think about why people would become entrepreneurs in the first place. What do you think would motivate somebody to quit their 40-hour-a-week job so they could work 80 hours a week on a new business? Why would you do that? Angel?
To hopefully get to the point where you have financial freedom.
Okay, so maybe for financial reasons, right? Thinking that, hey, if I make enough money, I can live the lifestyle I want, right? I don't have to go work for the man every day. Although, as you've kind of heard, it doesn't always work out that way, right? Sometimes you put yourself in a financial hole, start a business. But yeah, that might be the motivation. What else? What other reasons might somebody start a business? Aaron?
To help people,
To help people.
a little more. Yeah.
Okay, so you see that there's a need for a particular product or service, and either out of the goodness of your heart or because you want to capitalize on that opportunity, you could start a business. Okay, what else? Adriana?
You want to create generational wealth in the family.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you want to earn wealth that you can pass on to the next generation. What else?
On your own boss.
Want to be your own boss. Exactly, because even the CEO of a corporation has a boss, right? They have to listen to the board of directors. So really, as long as you're an employee at any level, you've got a boss. If you own the business, technically you don't have a boss, but in reality, you still do. Who's the boss if you're the owner of the company?
Sure.
To some degree, yeah, because you're regulated. Well, if it's a corporation, then they're also owners, right? But if let's say you're the sole owner, to make it more clear, who's the boss? Other than your spouse. The customer, right? Because that's where you get your money. If you don't keep the customer boss happy, you don't bring in revenue. So I think it's not that you don't have a boss anymore, it's just who your boss is changes. I think some entrepreneurs are in it for ego. Some are maybe in it for the excitement. I know that's a big part of my son's motivation. He's got a great job, but he finds it boring. So he loves to do this entrepreneurship stuff because it's fun and feels like he's learning. Maybe someday he'll make some money. We'll see.
With legacy,
What's that?
for the legacy that you might be.
Legacy, yeah, okay, yeah, from fame, fortune, who knows? So there can be many, many different motivations for starting a business. Comments or questions? All right, I think this is a good point to watch the video. So this video we're gonna watch, again, it's short and it's on the topic of grit. What do you think are the personality traits and the skills that make an entrepreneur successful? Okay, persistence, perfect.
Profit.
Profit, yeah, well, the business has to earn a profit so they can reinvest it. What else? Valentino?
Consistency,
Consistency, okay. In terms of what?
like, pretty much everything.
Okay. So I think having certain habits that you've developed for how you do things is really important for success. In fact, one of the greatest books I've read that has to do with success is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I highly recommend for everybody, by Dr. Stephen Covey. Yeah, having certain patterns and habits of doing things can help lead you towards success. What else? Persistence, consistency, profit. What else makes an entrepreneur successful? You have to, okay, you have to be able to take risks, but really calculated risks, right?
Mhm.
If you just say, oh, I'm gonna jump into this, I'm not even gonna do any research. It might work out, but probably not, right? So yes, be willing to take a risk, but also do your homework, do your research.
Most entrepreneurs are like charismatic and stuff.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. Yeah, being charismatic and outgoing can be very important. Now, there are some teams of entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak from Apple, or like Bill Gates and Paul Allen from Microsoft, where one of them was very outgoing, or at least more outgoing, and was kind of the face of the company, but the other one was more behind the scenes doing the operational analytical work. So I think both are important. You can have introverts who are successful entrepreneurs, but they need to have a partner who's an extrovert, from my experience. In some cases, you can find one person that's got both characteristics, but that's kind of hard. To be able to be really good in social situations and really good at the analytical stuff, it's hard to be excellent at both. All right, what else? What other traits make for good entrepreneurs? Here's a question for you. What about humility? Is that an important role for an entrepreneur? I think it is. There are definitely entrepreneurs that lack humility, that are kind of ego-centric and seek the fame. But I think the ones that really build a strong team are the ones that are willing to listen. They recognize they don't always have the right answer. I think that's more sustainable if they have humility. Aaron, I think I saw your hand going up.
Being a good leader.
Being a good leader, yeah, exactly. Remember that video I showed you about the role of the first follower, right? There was the crazy guy dancing, and then the one person came out to be his follower. And then more people came out, and then there was a whole movement. So that leadership, that crazy guy dancing was taking a risk, was doing something very extroverted, right? But he did need that team to support him eventually to make it a movement. Okay, I think we hit on many of the important traits and skills. Here's a saying you might have heard or might not have. What does it mean that an entrepreneur should work on the business, not in it? What do you think that means?
They should be focusing, putting their brain power on what can improve the business
Okay.
and not being stuck doing the labor.
Exactly, exactly. If you get too involved in the day-to-day stuff, you lose sight of the big picture. Right? You need to be able to hire people or bring in suppliers that can do the day-to-day things. So you could be thinking about, what are our competitors doing? What are our customers saying? How should we raise the financing to grow the company? These kind of big picture questions are really important, and you can lose sight of that if you're running around helping a customer find something in your store. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It could be a good experience. But if you're doing that all day long, how are you going to really grow the company? Right? Okay. Any questions or comments? So this is interesting. Nearly half of new businesses make it to their 5th year of operation. You look at the other side of the coin, what that's telling us is that more than half of new businesses don't make it to their 5th year of operation. Why do you think that is? Why would so many small businesses or new businesses fail within the first 5 years?
Create a loss. And then like the cycle of like moves, probably. But this life cycle.
product
of
life cycle?
It could fall off faster.
Okay. Yeah, operating at a loss is not sustainable. If you start a business and it's costing you money instead of making you money, at some point you're going to say, I can't do this anymore. Right? I'm losing too much money on this thing. Especially if you're spending all your time on the business and you're losing money. Not a good combination. So I think that is the number one reason. It's financial. If the business is growing, great. You could always hire more people to help run it for you. Or you could sell it. You have a lot of options. But if the business is not making a profit, there's only so long you can keep throwing money at it. On the other hand, 47% of US businesses have been in business for 11 or more years. So there are a lot of businesses out there that have been there for a long time. 47%, that's a pretty high number. So what that tells me is that even though it's hard to get that business to the 5-year mark, once you do, then you could probably sustain that business for a long time. But it's those first couple years that are going to be the hardest. I think a lot of people say, oh, this is going to be so much fun. I'm going to open up my cafe or whatever it is. And then they realize they have to worry about insurance and employees quitting and employees stealing out of the cash register and customers throwing a fit and the dog that came into the cafe and bit somebody. All these things that can go wrong when you're running a business.
Like a dog bites somebody with like a pit bull or something.
All kinds of things. The supplier didn't deliver on time or delivered some spoiled product, whatever it is. There's so many things that can go wrong when you're running a business. So a lot of times people get into it and they realize it's a lot harder than they thought. And it's a lot more expensive than they thought. And it might work out if they persist. They can probably eventually get it to a point where it's a successful business, but then they have to say, is it worth it? If it's making you stressed out and sick and broke, maybe it's not worth it, right? Right? And maybe it means you try another business instead. Maybe you just go get a job somewhere and not have to worry about revenue and expenses, right? But if you can sustain it past that 5-year mark, that's a good indication you're doing something right. Right? And then it's just a matter of continuing to sustain it and grow it. Okay, why don't we do the 8-minute group discussion where you come up with your video questions? So I'll give you 8 minutes starting now, and then we'll cover a few more slides later.
I wish you had from the video. Talk about anything.
Okay.
It's a pretty straight.
Time. So this is some more statistical information, looking at businesses that have employees and have been in business for at least 5 years. The majority of them have only 1 to 4 employees. And only a small number have between 20 and 49 employees. So again, what this tells us is employees are expensive. You could start a business and it could be successful, but the more employees you bring on, a lot of money. If, let's say you're paying an entry-level worker $15 an hour, plus all the required benefits, maybe it's costing you $18 an hour. That's $36,000 a year if it's a full-time employee. With 5 employees, that's $180,000 a year just in payroll expenses. So you can see how quickly it adds up. And that's, I think, a big part of why it's hard for these small businesses to become big businesses. Because they're just so much expense. Bless you. It can happen sometimes, but you have to have so much revenue coming in from your customers and such low costs for other things like making your product that you've got enough money to pay all those employees. How do we define small business? Well, there's no universal definition of what a small business is. The Small Business Administration looks at the revenue and profits of the company. They'll look at the number of employees and maybe also how many different geographical locations the company is based in to decide if this is a small business or not. And there are certain government programs you can benefit from if you are a small business. So that's why it makes a difference. But not everybody goes by the Small Business Administration's definition. So what might be a small business to one person might not be a small business to somebody else. And in fact, under the Small Business Administration's definition, you can have up to 100 employees and still be considered a small business. If you're a manufacturing company, you can have up to 500 employees and be considered a small business. So it really varies.
What is it? What can making a small difference in the big business and the small business?
Yeah, so again, could be number of employees. Like if you're a non-manufacturing business that has more than 100, that could be one factor, right? But it could be based on how much revenue you burn. Or if
Okay.
you're operating globally with offices in 3 different countries. You know, it depends on whose definition you go by.
Okay.
There's no clear definition. There has been a rise in small businesses here, according to the textbook. What do you think might have contributed to more people starting their own businesses in recent years? Okay, people getting laid off, especially during the pandemic.
Like your economic turnover rate, and then also on the social media and the rise of technology, right?
Okay,
All these e-commerce platforms.
exactly.
LLCs,
What's that?
the LLC, they're making LLCs.
Mhm.
Okay, so people starting their own businesses, structuring them as LLCs, taking advantage of the internet. Because like I gave you the example earlier, drop shipping on Amazon or TikTok influencers or whatever it might be that you do online to make some money. So technology's made it easier. In an economic downturn, that might cause some people, because they've lost their job or because they need to raise some more money, to think, what can I do? What kind of business can I start to make some more money, right? On the other hand, when the economy is going well, that also can generate new businesses. Because people say, hey, I made a whole bunch of money from this job or this project, I'm gonna take some of it, I'm going to invest it in my own. Or like my friends, I consider him a friend, the billionaire I mentioned, I don't know if he considers me a friend, but Steve Sarowitz, he worked for payroll software companies for a number of years until he was in a position to start his own, right? So it was his job success that made him able to start his own business because he had connections. He had people that would be his clients that he had met through the industry. And he had the knowledge of the industry, right? So that put him in the right position to create the right product at the right time. All right, let's cover one more slide here. If you're going to start a business, think about your why, your reason. We talked about some of the reasons people start small businesses, so think about what is my reason that I'm doing this? And be clear. Is it to make money? Is it to help the world? What really is the reason? Then take a good look at your own abilities. Remember SWOT analysis? How we talked about that is looking at the strengths and weaknesses of a company and also its opportunities and threats. You can do a SWOT analysis of yourself and say, what are my strengths, but also what are my weaknesses? Sometimes it's hard to admit. What are the opportunities that exist for me, and what are the threats that are out there? And once you've really done a good self-analysis, that'll tell you a lot about what you need to do to be successful as an entrepreneur. If you're an extrovert, again, maybe you need to have somebody working with you who can handle the organizational stuff while you're out networking. Or if you're more the introvert, maybe you need to have a partner, not a legal partner, but somebody in your business that can go out and be the face of the business and be more social. What skills and experience do you bring to the table? What is the niche market that you can serve with your business? It's going to be hard for your competitors to copy, right? Carve out some narrow segment that only your company is really going to be able to effectively address, which involves market research. Not just do you think people want this product, but how many people really want the product? Who are those people? Where do I find them? And how much are they willing to pay? Right? You can get that through market research. Develop a business plan. You don't have to do that, but I think you'll find as you go through your business plan assignment, it causes you to think through all aspects of the business and would increase your likelihood of success. And then the money. Do you have enough money to invest and start this business? If you lose the money, are you going to be okay with that? Or do you need to find investors, maybe lenders, but that's kind of risky too, because then if the business doesn't work out, you've got debt and a failed business, right? So how are you going to raise the money to make the business successful? So those are things to think about. Any final comments or questions? All right, well, that's it for today. See you all Thursday.